Hello, just a quick heads up. Going to be looking for volunteers for this one. Actually, just going to do this as well. Give me 1 second. Might pull an audio because sometimes people prefer to listen rather than watch. Alrighty, so here we go. So I'm looking for kind of volunteers for this one. So let me just give you a sense of what I'm doing. So it's a volunteer, two volunteers, because sometimes people go, yeah, yeah, I'll do it, and then they don't. And it's always nice to get a couple of different opinions as well. So two volunteers for a Ho'oponopono process that I've put together. So it's an audio recording. And Ho'oponopono, there's what I call the social media version. I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you. And then there's what I call the full production version, which is what I learned when I went out to study Huna in Hawaii. So we've got the stage, we've got the Arca connections, we've got the Avaiku, we've got the Huna guides, we've got the symbols and all of that stuff. And so I want a couple of volunteers before I launch it as a product. So just get some feedback. How does it work? Easy to do. I'm sometimes not decided on whether or not I want music or if I want them silent. So it's always interesting to have a little bit of feedback with regards to that as well. Now, some of you, well, if you followed me for a while, you've definitely come across the Huna. So it's the thing I'm often talking about. I was talking about this one the other day, actually, in terms of I was at a particular conference. Somebody was tired. They just flown into Japan, arrived in London, came straight to the conference, absolutely knackered. And they said they're not even sure if they come back for the evening session. They might miss the morning session. So I just did like 2 minutes of Huna with them. And they then looked at me and says, Huna is better than Starbucks. Huna is better than Red Bull, which always makes me smile. Ignore that URL. That doesn't go anywhere anymore. This is just kind of one of the older slides. So it's real powerful stuff. So during the Ho'oponopono, we take you through the whole process. And then there's also the Huna energy clearing as well. One of the things I really, really love about Huna is when I was growing up, there was a particular advert. I don't drink, definitely not beer, lager, etc. But there was an advert for an organization, company called Heineken. And their strapline was Heineken refreshes the parts that other beers cannot reach. And I think of Huna in terms of the energy field and energy work. I think of Huna in that way as well, is in you could have over 500 people in a room and they will all get something completely different, really profound, incredible, amazing from the Huna. And again, I just did like 2 minutes of Huna. This was at the TCCHE events. You've got Greg Braden, Dr. Joe Dispenza and Dr. Bruce Lipton there, and did 2 minutes of Huna on the stage. People had no idea what I was doing. There was absolutely no setup because it was very unique circumstances. And throughout the rest of that conference, I could not walk 2 steps without somebody saying, oh my God, I don't know what you were doing, but when you started waving your hands around or making those noises, this happened. And it was just mind blowing. And I had people emailing me days and weeks after the event to tell me what continued to happen, because it is that wonderful ripple effect. So, and there are times, for those of you who are photo readers, for example, you would have experienced the Huna, well, if you've done photo reading in the last 10 or so years, the bonus Huna session that we do. And one of my clients, they talk about grabbing the bull by the horns. You didn't tell me when you did the Huna healing on me. Oh my God, I couldn't believe how accurate your diagnosis was. You didn't tell me you're a doctor, as well as everything else, because it's always really profound in terms of what we're doing and the things that will shift and change. And oftentimes I do a session with a client, for example. I remember years ago, we'd done a timeline therapy piece for a particular client, did a breakthrough session, bit of the, actually that was in the days where people would turn up for a session and I wasn't necessarily doing the Huna in the way I do it now, but I would place the Huna symbols under the sofa cushion. So they would sit on them, you know, because they fill out a pre-questionnaire. So I know what they want to work on. I've been through the questionnaire, have an idea, and then I would place the appropriate symbols under the sofa cushion. Oh God, I just remembered that years ago. And there's one particular client who we were doing some work around relationships, breakups, toxic relationship, etc., and had this breakup, finally broken off contact, but they were in that place where they kind of wanted some explanation and an apology. And if you've ever had a relationship break up badly, you might know that feeling. So we finished the process. My client switched their phone on to look at their calendar, and a message popped up from their ex-partner, and they said those immortal words, "You're not going to believe this." And I'm like, go on then. And I pretty much knew what they were going to say. They said there's a message, and they're saying they just really sorry of how things ended. They wanted to apologize. That's the crazy cool thing that kind of happens. I had another client, we did the 1-day breakthrough session, and they were working on a business partnership that had gone sour. They were working abroad, partner didn't behave well as far as they were concerned, and so that partnership split, and they came back to the UK. So we finished the breakthrough session. This was in the days when I was doing them here at my house in person. Now I do them online. And so they drove away, and about 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and I was like, "Oh, here we go." So I see their number come up, so I put my headset on. And I'm like, "Hi," and while I'm talking, I've got my hand down the back of the sofa because I'm like, "Oh, they maybe left their house keys or something like that." I said, "What's up?" And they said, "You're not going to believe this." I went, "Have you left something behind?" I went, "No." They said, "My partner from where abroad I got in my car, I'm just setting up, plugged in my phone, listening to my messages. They said there's a message from my ex-business partner saying, 'Hi, I'm back in the UK, really sorry with how things ended. Can we meet up for a beer?'" I mean, I get goosebumps now when I think about some of these stories. So that's how powerful it can be. I had another client who did not have good relationship with family or siblings. So we did the Ho'oponopono, cutting those old links and ties and connections, doing the forgiveness process, all of that stuff. They sent me an email later that week saying, straight after we did the session, I had a lovely conversation with my dad, which is very unusual, and I've arranged to meet up with my siblings, and they had the most wonderful time. So the first time something happens like that, you can go, no, I don't believe in coincidences, but you could just go, it's a fluke, it's a coincidence. I've been doing Huna. Well, I first was introduced to Huna in the year 2000, October 2000. My first trip to Hawaii was in 2005. I went again to do the next level in 2009. So I've been using Huna for over 2 decades. There are so many of these so-called coincidences that there is absolutely no way I could just write it off. It is just too uncanny and too, as clients will go, "Oh my God, unbelievable." So what I'm doing with regards to the Ho'oponopono is I've put it together as a guided process so that you can listen to it, you can take yourself through it. A couple of things to kind of bear in mind, I'm going to say. So first of all, let me just very quickly give you the heads up, because I'm doing this so that when I speak to my e-newsletter list, I can be nice and clear what's going on, what's it all about, how's it work. So it's an audio process. You're going to be listening to something, an MP3. So that's the first thing. It's an audio. It is, in terms of running times, the amount of time required for you to go through this, it's 27 minutes. So let's just say put aside half an hour, because beforehand you might want to get your water handy, make sure you're sitting comfortably. You can do it eyes open or eyes closed. Personally, I prefer eyes closed because you can then just close out all of the distractions and just focus on the process. You can do it sitting up, you can do it lying down. Now, if you're someone who just tends to lies down and goes straight to sleep, you might want to do it sitting up first of all. However, if you are a sleeper, set the intention that while you're sleeping peacefully, the audio recording can be working powerfully in the background. So that's the workaround I would suggest. But you can do it sitting up, you can do it lying down. I have clients do both when we take them through, but you're going to need about half an hour. And I'd also say have a couple of minutes at the end of it so you can just chill, bring yourself back into now rather than having to get up and do a dash somewhere. Also, what else? Yes, very important. Don't just volunteer and go, yeah, it'll be interesting to listen to. That's not what I'm interested in. You can purchase a copy later and listen to it to your heart's content. What I'm interested in is you've actually got an issue that you want to work on. So Ho'oponopono, it's called the forgiveness process. It's where you have, so for example, if I just maybe use the examples I've talked about already, one of the clients was in a toxic relationship, wanted to break the ties of that because it was still kind of infusing into their life, even though they weren't in contact with the person. The thoughts and what had happened, all of that was eating away at them. So that might be a scenario. The scenario with the ex-business partner, for example, so they had ended on bad terms. the scenario with the family, the siblings. So one of the things, you may have heard of something called family constellations, which is completely different to Ho'oponopono. However, the sort of issues that might take someone to a family constellation session is also the sort of thing that we would work on with the Ho'oponopono. Or it could be there's a particular situation or circumstance. A common one, for example, is working with a boss or a colleague and you don't get on. There's what you might call bad blood between you. And the whole premise of Ho'oponopono is cleaning up those relationships and what we call making them right or making them pono. There was one particular client, for example, just booked a 1 hour. I'd spoken at the Richmond NLP group many, many years ago. And someone who was in the group booked a session with me, just a 1 hour coaching session. So she walked in. That was, again, I'm looking over there because there's when I used to do sessions at home. So she comes in the front door and I said, so what would you like to work on? She says, well, I hate my life. I hate my boss. I hate my job. I was like, well, not much then. So I thought, how can we tackle all of this? So I did amongst other things, we did some timeline therapy work, did a quick bit of clearing, and also did a version of Ho'oponopono. Do the session, 1 hour, off they go. A couple of days later, because I'd only met them once and I didn't actually individually speak to them at the Richmond NLP group. I was doing the keynote presentation, people sitting in the audience. So they phoned me up a couple of days later and said, hi, my name is, I'm thinking of Eminem now, my name is, anyway, I digress. So they said their name and I was silent because I'm like, who the hell is that? So I did not respond because the name didn't even register with me because I'd only heard it the once. And they said, okay, I did a session. I went, oh yeah, gosh, sorry, how are you? And they said, I can't believe it. I've just had to phone and tell you what happened. I was like, oh cool, what happened? Now, one of the reasons they hated their job and hated their boss is they've been working at this organization for many years, and they realized many of the new interns and starters who got on very well with the boss were earning more than they were. And they had basically just come in wet behind the ears. So they were not happy. And then their boss would call them into the office. It was always for a dressing down. So it's almost like they see their boss. If you know NLP, there's something called anchoring, where you can see something, hear something, smell something, taste something, remember something, and you have a physical reaction to it. Now, if it's a good reaction, like me kind of thinking of Slim Shady, I'm smiling at that because I like that song, and I can still hear it in my head. That's a smile inducer. If, however, you really don't get on with your boss, you're intimidated, you feel put upon, they're always picking on you, they're never satisfied, they're always pulling you up on your faults, you see your boss, you hear your boss, you think about your boss, you might even smell their perfume or aftershave, and your body has a negative reaction. So they were in that negative reaction phase at just being called into the office, like, oh God, what now? That was their heart sinks, pit of the stomach, fed up, dejected, all that sort of stuff. And that had been going on for years. So I said, what happened? They said, well, I went into work and my boss asked how my weekend was. And they meant it, as in they asked the question and then stayed long enough to hear the answer. And they dialogued and they were like, well, that's weird. It's like, all right, then. Now, just to make it clear, it wasn't time for a pay rise. It wasn't appraisal time. It wasn't review time. It wasn't anything time. Their boss then says, oh, can I have a word with you? Can you see me in my office? Number one, my client didn't feel that immediate feeling of dread because we've kind of cleaned up the energy around that. So like, yeah, okay. And they went in like, okay, let's see what it is now. I'm fine. You know, we're building in that sense of resilience. If you think of, there's a toy called Weebles. I'm looking there because, I know it's in my photo reading suitcase, but often I have like a Weeble on the table. The same as Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. So you can knock them down, but like Chumbawamba, another song reference because the jukebox is going now, they get back up again. So she goes into the client goes into the office and the boss said, oh, we were reviewing the files and we noticed that you're being underpaid. So from this month, you will be receiving a pay increase. My client nearly fainted. It was just like, what on earth? They were like, what did you do to my boss? I'm like, I don't know your boss. I've never met your boss. I have no idea who your boss is. I don't even know your boss's name. I know nothing about your boss, but this was out of the blue. The only thing that had been different was doing the breakthrough, the mini breakthrough coaching session and the energy clearing work. So that is how profound it can be. And with all of that said, I never know what is going to happen? So I always just say, notice what you notice, but having an issue to work on, something where you know how you feel about it now, how you think about it now, how it presents itself to you now. That's the first thing, because we want to be able to benchmark. So that's number one. Number two, I feel like I'm thinking of the count with the count from Sesame Street. 1, 2. Sorry, the jukebox in the brain is just going crazy in there. If you could see what was in my head, you'd probably run a mile. Anyway, number 2 is provide feedback, because I want you to, you know the issue, do some benchmarking around that beforehand. I'll send you a few questions to think about. Note to self, Marilyn, write those questions. Do the process and then notice what you notice. Now, there will be times where there's something immediate, where you just, like, let's say you got the pit of the stomach, or you kind of tense up, or the rest of it. You might just notice that physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, you feel different. Great. And then notice, as and when a similar situation arises, how do you actually react, or the lack thereof? Because rather than, can I have a word with you in my office, they weren't like, they were like, oh, okay. And just like, whoa, that was weird. It just feels different. You react differently. So I want you to notice all of those things, provide some feedback with regards to all of that. That's why I say have a clear issue to work on, rather than just going, oh yeah, I'll have a listen. That's not what I'm looking for. So feedback is going to be key. And then also provide some future updates, or a future update. For example, you find yourself in a scenario or something happens and you're like, wow, that's amazing. And I know the very first time, well, I didn't know what was happening at that time. When I did my NLP training in October 2000, I will admit I volunteered because I was being somewhat facetious. I was only there to get a refund. That's a story for another day. And so when the trainer asked for a volunteer, in order to build my arsenal of tried it didn't work, it's rubbish, I volunteered. And the trainer said, similar to what I'm saying to you, he said, is there anyone here who's got an issue that they like to work on, maybe a difficult relationship, challenging relationship, causing you an issue, bringing up negative emotions, anger, sadness, fear, guilt, anxiety, that sort of thing. Now, I genuinely did have an issue on this occasion, but I thought, let me volunteer, because it's be yet another thing I can put in the bag. So when I go for my refund, I can say, well, I did that and that didn't work, and I tried that and that didn't work, and I tried that and that didn't work. So that's part of the motivation, if I'm honest. So I volunteered. The trainer picked me and said, okay, think of the issue. So I thought of the issue, I thought of the person, I thought of the scenario, and I had that, oh, for God's sake, because that's kind of how I felt about it. And they've been going on my entire life. And so they said, have you thought of an issue? Yes. Okay, great. And then they carried on teaching the class. About 10, 15 minutes into their segment, they turned to me and said, how are you doing? I was like, fine, thanks. Carried on teaching the class. Another 15, 20 minutes later, turned to me and said, how are you doing? I'm like, dude, you haven't done anything. But I'm like, yeah, okay. And this went on for like a good hour or so. At the end of the segment that they were teaching, before we went into an exercise, they turned to me again and said, how are you doing? And I was just about to go off on one and go, well, you haven't done anything. I've just been sitting here waiting. And as I thought about the situation, the person, I felt a bit different. I didn't feel quite so tense about it. I wasn't so about it. However, I reasoned that was because they desensitized me, because they left me to think about it for over an hour and just like warned me into boredom. But as soon as I was back in that situation, the whole thing would kick off again. So I said, I feel a bit better about it, blah, blah. But really, I went into the exercise going, what was all that about? What I didn't know is there's the silent version of Huna, where you're sending the symbols, not doing all the that's the bells and whistles version, which we're doing on the recording. There's a version where, like, I can be sitting with a client, they can say something, I can then, of course, with their permission, because that's why they're there, so I can then send some Huna and do some energy work while I'm sitting doing what we're doing now and just conversing, or me listening, la 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 la. And then that's while they'll get to a point and go, gosh, you know what, I feel so, well, that's weird. I know we haven't started, this is what we haven't started yet, but I feel really different already. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. I'm giggling to myself. So I realized they were doing the silent version of Huna and Ho'oponopono and working with the Avaika with the Huna guides and all that. But at the time, I didn't know what was going on. But what happened is, went home that night, and there was a message from the person that I have an issue with, which was at first, oh, I'm not going to believe this, because that person never phoned me. My first thought was, oh my gosh, has something happened? Is something wrong? But it was so weird for them to phone me. So I was like, oh my gosh, I better ring back. So I rang back, and I hadn't told them that I had taken, because I was studying to be a chartered accountant. I hadn't told them I'd taken a week off to do the NLP training, because I thought, oh, I'm just going to get an earful. Why don't you just focus on what you're doing? Why are you dating these side tangents, wasting your money on that? And I just thought, I can't be doing with it. It's weird enough as it is. I'm only there for a refund. I don't need the extra aggro or the grief. So I didn't tell them where I was going. So they then said, oh, phoned earlier, you were out. And I said, oh yeah, I was on a course. The natural assumption should be that I was on an accountancy course. So I was doing the ACCA. Oh, no. They then said to me, what course? And at that point, I'm like, oh man, should I just lie? It would be easier to lie. But then when you tell a lie, you're going to have to keep the lie up, and they might forget what you lied about if you're not a seasoned liar. So I thought, let me just go all in, pick the worst thing I can say. I said, no, it was a sort of personal development course, studying hypnotherapy. I thought, let me just throw it in there, just go straight for the jugular. And I'm waiting for this. I'm waiting for the usual visceral response and the talking down to. They were pregnant at the time with the twins. First thing they said to me is, oh, that's interesting. Do you think hypnotherapy could help me with my morning sickness? At this point, like it was the old style phone, I was in my kitchen and the phone was on the wall and it had the really long lead. I pretty much went back to class the next day and I said, they have been abducted by aliens, because that was the most logical explanation I could think of to describe that interaction. And not only were they genuine about that, when I went to see them that weekend, I took my pendulum. Now, nowadays I use a dowsing rod. So nowadays I use this because when I'm dowsing for clients, it's much easier for them to, okay, let's have a spin for yes. So it's much easier for a client to see that than the dowsing rod, which I'm holding. And because I have a different view when I'm looking on the dowsing rod, looking on a pendulum, it looks different to the client. It's not as clear. So when I'm doing these sorts of sessions, well, that's a signal for yes. I'll then say, give me a clear different signal for no. And then we'll get into whatever we're dowsing on. But on this occasion, this was 24, coming up to 24 years ago, I was using a pendulum. So I'm holding the pendulum. There's a crystal on the end, and the pendulum is swinging. And this person they're a lawyer. They're not into the things that I'm into at all. So me saying, let's douse and see if you're having a boy and a girl, or a girl and a boy, two boys, two girls, whatever. It was completely bonkers and alien, but that was a conversation we had when I went round. And the relationship has been different ever since that day. And I'd known them my entire life. So I was like, what just happened there? Either they've been abducted by aliens, everything else about them seemed normal. So my next illogical conclusion was, whatever that weird stuff is that the trainer was doing impacted the other person. But it just didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, whoa. And then, of course, with the stuff I'm talking about now with the remote experiment, for those who taking part in the quantum entanglement piece, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance, it's all kind of explained by that, the Schrodinger's cat and holographic universe, all of that sort of stuff. I was just getting into it back then, but it's all about that kind of thing. So the Ho'oponopono can have and it's that ripple effect as well. For those of you who have seen my if you've seen my logo over the years, it's a water drop, because you're going to experience, you're most likely, as clients have over the past 2+ decades, you experience the ripple effect with this one, where you get the catalytic impact, where you will notice something or something happens outside of yourself and you go, whoa, what was that? And then you get these wonderful ripples, because it can also then start to impact other situations and scenarios which are similar to the one that you're originally working on, because it's not just confined to that one scenario. So I'd like you to kind of give me some future updates when you notice those light bulb moments, those wow moments, those aha moments. So that's what it's all about. And this is something, let me just, where's that? So If you're watching this within the e-newsletter, there's going to be some, probably, I think the video is normally above, so the details should be below. If you happen to be watching this, let's say on YouTube or on social media, details are probably going to be in the description or in the comments. But this one, with regards to that, if you're an e-newsletter subscriber, then what I'll be doing is I'll email out the details. I'll summarize all of this just so you can, in terms of the criteria, so you can deselect yourself if you're like, nah, I haven't got an issue, I'm just curious. But if you are on the e-newsletter list, you kind of fit that criteria, there's something you'd like to work on, you're happy to provide some feedback, to do some benchmarking as well, report back as and when cool, wonderful things happen, then let me know. So with regards to this one, if you're not on my e-newsletter list and you're watching this after the fact and go, oh man, I'd like to volunteer for some of that stuff. When I'm trialing new stuff, you can see the bit.ly link down there, www.bitly.com/ENL sign up, as in e-newsletter sign up. You can also go to my main website, which is transformationstm.com. That's www.trance, as in hypnotic trance, so TRANCE, F for Freddy, so FORMATIONS, TM as in trademark, so transformationstm.com. Once you land on the website, you're going to see a red What's New button. If you click that, a panel will slide out, and that's forthcoming events, like a calendar sort of system. If you look on the opposite side, left-hand side, near the top, you'll see a box where you can sign up for my e-newsletter. So if you sign up for the e-newsletter, that's the place where if I am trying things out, I'll often look for my volunteers there. When I'm launching new products, you often get pre-launch before I release it. So at a different price point, you get your 10% e-newsletter discount when we're in that pre-launch stage. So you get all of that. If I'm running free events, etc., you get invited to those. And you'll also get first dibs on early booking prices, which is key when there are limited places, for example, for some of the events. So yeah, if you haven't yet joined the e-newsletter list, get yourself signed up and we will go from there. But yeah, if you're up for doing a little bit of Ho'oponopono action and volunteering, then yeah, let me know. But HUNA is definitely one of the favorite processes for my clients. I often mix that with the access consciousness as well, because it's a really nice way just to get to the heart of an issue, whiz it around, clear it out of the system. And with regards to the recording, I've kept it neutral. So that's one of the things I want some feedback on as well. What I haven't done is, like, let's say if I was doing a timeline therapy process, there'll be a process where we clear anger, and then we clear sadness, then we clear fear, then we clear guilt, da 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 da. With this one, there's no imposition on what we're working on. So there's like what I call the blank space, where I'm going to say, okay, bring to mind the situation or scenario that is relevant for you. Invite all of the participants onto the stage, but you are then filling in those blanks with your mindset, rather than me talking about bringing in this type of person or that type of person or working with this type of issue. So I just want to make sure that there's enough time and place and space for you to bring your own things to the table. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. If you know someone who could benefit, because this will be a product, once I'm happy that it's ready and that it works and it does what it says on the tin and it has the desired effect, this will be a particular product. So if you know someone who would be interested, or you could gift it to someone if you're like, man, they got stuff, let me send them this, then, you know, feel free to get in touch. And what I'll probably do is I'll find these recordings and I'll put the link where you can purchase it once I've done the volunteer. And the volunteer thing is, of course, free. But once it's ready, then it will be a product available for purchase. All right, thank you for watching, thank you for sharing, and thank you in advance to those of you who will be volunteering, and also thank you a little bit further in advance for those of you who purchase the processes for yourself. All right, I shall leave it there, wishing you a fabulous rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are in the world. Marilyn Devonish, the NeuroSuccess Coach from transformationstm.com, over and out. And also one quick thing, today, if you're watching this in real time, I've just launched the Happiness Generator workshop. So it's the final in a 6-part series, and that is launched now. So for those of you on my e-newsletter list, when I send the next e-newsletter out, I'll include your 10% off early booking pre-launch code. So use the code when you're booking rather than just going to the link that I've shared on social media. But I will also add the link to that to the What's New panel as well. And that's going to be a live in-person half-day video webinar workshop. And with regards to that one, of course, if you can't make it live, you'll have access to the replay recording. And I haven't set the date yet, so I'm going to set the date at the end of this month so that I choose a date that everyone who's booked, if you want to do it live, that you're all available. So look out for the happiness generator as well. And actually, the happiness generator and Ho'oponopono make a very nice couple. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thank you also for sharing. Catch you later.